Hello and welcome to our commentary video for our latest race at Oulton Park. No messing about this time, straight into the video so you can see what's what. Oulton Park in Cheshire, brilliant parkland circuit, and here's a little map of it with a trace of me pretending to drive around really quick. Fast left-hander at Cascades, hate that corner, it's off camber, but it sets you up nicely for this little run down Lakeside, which is aptly named because it goes by the side of a lake. Kinks off to the left and then out into Cheshire somewhere before coming back into the Mickey Mouse chicane. It's had so many names, this chicane, over the years. Fly up the hill, down the other side, into the comically named Knicker chicane, or some other name, up Clay Hill, round Druids Corner, difficult right-hander, down all the way to Lodge Corner and up through Deer Leap for a lap of Oulton Park. Look at that, nice and easy. Normally takes us about 2 minutes and 10 seconds in race trim, but I was very pleased. Oh, look at that, Danny Casser and Dan Adams from DHD. Little celebrity cameos for you, there you go. So in qualifying I managed to do a 2 minute 8.7 second lap, which was brilliant. I was really pleased with that. It's about 3 seconds quicker than I was last year in Puma Cup spec. However, because of the transponder situation, my transponder wasn't working in qualifying. I was manually timed by the timekeepers from up in race control, and they gave me a time of 2 minutes and 1 second, which was an awful lot faster than I actually was. Now normally that would be a good thing, however it meant starting from 11th place on the grid, and if that was the case I would have been surrounded by much faster cars. It would have been dangerous, there's no two ways about it. The closing speeds of the other cars, cars nipping out to overtake me, other cars being unsighted, I would have literally been in the way. I wasn't prepared to do it, considering that starting from the back of the grid, although disappointing, it only put me a handful of rows behind the other Pumas, so I was confident I could get onto them pretty quickly and start making my way through the pack. But it was a legitimate pole position on my actual fastest lap time, but it was taken away due to circumstance. I'm not blaming anyone other than myself because my transponder subscription had expired, and well, yeah, that makes it my fault. So the grid for the Puma Cup looks a little bit like this. Luke Johnson in the silver car promoted to pole position, and in only their second or third race, Mr Cotgrove, Mr Smithson managed to get second place. Awesome for them. Mark Jackson in the green Puma third, father and son Neil and Frank in the white Puma, and then myself starting from the back of the grid. And I don't know why I put yellow Puma on there, you all know mine's the yellow one, or you should do. So fast forward a little bit because this is just the warm-up lap. I'm getting the tyres and brakes up to temperature. Boring. You've seen it all before. Now, we were meant to have a standing start for this race, but I think someone forgot to tell the start line marshals that I was starting from the back of the grid, because as they're pointing each car into their grid slot, they just never really got to me. And you can see before I've actually started, the red lights in the middle of that gantry up above, they come on, and I'm not in my grid spot yet. They go out of view here, but you can hear from the other engines going that the race has started. I was never actually stationary at any point during that start procedure. I think, was it Neil Jackson or Frank in the white car? I can't remember who started for them, but I think they had the same problem. It's like caught us completely unawares. But yeah, the race has now started. So managed to clear the white Pumas straight away, which was great. Did you see that? There was a big pile up. That happened too quick. I'm going to have to put a replay in. Hang on a minute, I'm going to do a quick edit on the video. There you go, in slow motion you can see the cars on the left hand side. 1, 2, 3 of them I think were involved. Again, yeah, confirmed in the mirror. Now based on where those cars started on the grid, if I'd have taken my actual position, then there's every chance that I would have got caught in that. So it made me think I'd made the right choice, and well, from this point on, as was always going to be the plan, it's just mission on. Look, there's a fourth one there that got caught up as well. I saw that. I think it was a Fiesta on the left hand side. So from here on, just let things settle down a little bit. I've got 3 Pumas ahead of me. There's also a guy coming through on the left hand side, one of the faster cars that was out of position. But I want to get rid of these Pumas in the nicest possible way as quickly as possible. So managed to get on the inside and outbrake break the blue car, Mr Cotgrove, Mr Smithson. So that's up to third now, about a third of the way around the lap. So far it's going pretty well. Now, one of my weaknesses, or things that I've identified to work on, is that I need to be more aggressive at the start of the races. I've often been a little bit too ginger, and it's almost like the penalty for doing so is exaggerated at the start of the race, because you got that concertina effect. So this lap, I thought every chance I get to pass a car, I'm going to take it. I'm not going to sit back and wait for a better opportunity. If I've got a good one, I'm going to go for it. So I managed to clear that red Fiesta just there, and look at Mark Jackson here in the green Puma. He got stuck letting that car through, and I had to hang it around the outside of him on the left hand part of the Knickers chicane. I ran a little bit wide trying to get my foot down and get a good run up the hill so that Mark couldn't come back at me, but here's another car, I think it's a Clio, that was qualified out of position and has managed to come and overtake me on the inside up to Druids. So 3/4 of the way around the lap now, and I'm in second place. Luke Johnson up ahead in the silver Puma. Now, I know you can't see him, but he is up there somewhere. I managed to qualify about a second and a half faster than Luke, so I feel like I've got pace over him. However, he did have problems in qualifying, and he was always going to get quicker in the race. But crossing the line here at the end of lap 1, I was approximately 12.4 seconds behind Luke. Now, I must admit, I didn't know that gap whilst I was in the car, but once Mark put the pit board out for me at the end of this current lap and showed me that gap, I started doing some maths in my head. Now, if I'd got a second and a half advantage over Luke from qualifying, I could knock that down to a second, because I wouldn't be able to do that pace the whole race, you know, lap after lap. Similarly, he'd got pace to find, so that second advantage then drops to, say, half a second, something like that. Now, that's pretty significant if we were racing wheel to wheel, but half a second to close 12.4 means I'm going to need 24 laps. Now, the race will not be 24 laps, we just don't have that amount of time, it's a 40-minute race. So I need to make sure that I close that difference by clearing the traffic as quickly as possible, not getting delayed, not getting held up, not driving in my mirrors. And this is a good example. Look how much we close on these Mazda RX-8s in front of us under braking, and that we hold them around the corner, but then they drive away down the straight. Now, at the moment, I've not actually been held up, because in my braking zone, I was able to brake as I wanted to. However, in this one, it's starting to get a bit close now. I don't like them being this close to my front bumper, but making the pass is really, really tricky, because they've got faster straight line speed. So I can do everything in my power to make the overtake, but unfortunately the laws of physics just are against me. Look how much they've pulled away there coming up Clay Hill. And then again, under braking for Druids, I brake later, I close up, hold on to them round the corner, and I get my foot down a little bit earlier and get a better exit, but their top end grunt and slipstream just, they either pull away from me a little bit, or I absolutely hero it on the brakes down the inside to large corner and take my first Mazda. Thank you very much indeed. That was not a particularly planned overtake, but it was important, because at the end of lap 2, the gap to Luke is approximately 13.7 seconds, so it's gone out by 1.4 rather than coming down by half. So I'm about 2 seconds behind my own schedule now, and at this point in the race I'm now aware of that gap to Luke, because Mark the mechanic has hung the pit board out for me, and I've managed to read it and see what the gap is. So it's these Mazdas. What can I do? I've got to push on, I've got to do my best to get past them, but it's just so difficult, and I hate to keep going on about it. Look at that one in the rearview mirror. You know, I exited Cascades quite a way ahead, but he was almost having a look going around Lakeside Corner. But again, gap opens up on the inside. Just be brave, John, just be brave. No point messing about. I knew that he'd seen me because of the body language of the car, so had to be later on the brakes and get round the corner ahead of him. So that's 2 of them gone, and I think from memory there's maybe 1 or 2 Mazdas left ahead. I can't honestly remember. and this one here, the one with the 2 stripes on the back, he's far enough ahead that he's not really bothering me at the moment, but if I continue to catch him, then we'll start getting into that zone where we're holding each other up, which is of course just no good for anybody. So round the Nicker chicane, just concentrating, pushing, knowing full well that Luke Johnson has probably got much clearer air ahead of him, because the Mazdas are in a slower class. Well, I say slower class, the majority of the Mazdas are slower than the majority of the Pumas, but the faster Mazdas are faster than the slowest Pumas. So, and then also the faster Pumas are faster than the fastest Mazdas. Did that make sense? I'm not saying it again. So rewind and replay if you'd like to have another listen of that. I think I confused myself saying that, to be honest. So we're coming up to the end of lap 3. I would like this gap to be less than 13 seconds to Luke Johnson now, but Mark hangs the pit board out, and what does it say? It says that Luke has pulled away by another half a second, and it's now 14.2. This is starting to worry me, because the plan was to take half a second out of Luke each lap, and I'm not doing it. In fact, I'm doing the opposite. He's pulling away from me. Now, it can only be because of these Mazdas. And I don't want to... Well, I don't want to keep making excuses or anything, but I just can't do anything about this guy in front of me. He's got genuine pace. I'd love to know what his lap time was versus my lap time. I bet they were really, really close, and more than likely I was annoying him as much as he was annoying me. The only way to get rid of a car in this situation, well, besides the obvious, is to wait for the pit stop window. Unfortunately, the pit stop window doesn't open until I think it's 10 minutes into the race. So when it does open, if you're being held up by somebody, you're in a battle like this, you can get into the pits and get your stop out of the way, hoping that when you then come out of the pit, oh, look at that, he got a terrible exit there. Held me up probably half a second to a second, but then he just storms away down the straight. There's nothing I can do about it. A bit more grunt, maybe I would have been able to get an overlap, but again, he'd have been too far in front by the time we hit the braking zone for that chicane there. So I'm getting really frustrated now. I can see on my lap time on the dashboard that I'm hemorrhaging lap time, and the gap to Luke is just going to keep growing and growing and growing unless I can do something about this Mazda. But I just can't. I was out of ideas. I was studying around the circuit. Where am I faster than him? Where are my strengths compared to his weaknesses? This was one of those potential areas, but I'm not quite close enough on the run down to Lodge Corner. So again, I will brake hard, I will turn in sharp, I'll stamp on the throttle, and I will close up a little bit and try and get a run on the way up through the start line. But again, it just doesn't happen. So what's the gap this time, Mark? It's 17.2 seconds, John. It's getting bigger and bigger, and I'm thinking now that I'm resigned. I can't do anything. Again, flying out of Old Hall, I've seen the pit board. I'm disappointed now because I'm out of options. I have to put my sensible head on and think that I'm not going to get past this Mazda. Even if I do get past him, I'm not going to be able to pull enough of a gap so that I can comfortably drive around at my own pace. I'm still going to be in the mirrors, having to take defensive lines. So I sort of change tack a little bit. I try and calm down and think, you know what, John, take it steadier, look after your tyres, try and look after the car. One thing I've suffered with in the past is that the tyres tend to go off a little bit towards the end of the race, maybe the last 10-15 minutes. Now, it's not that they're running out of grip, it's just that they're overheating, and I don't know what the thresholds are in terms of the temperatures or anything like that, but it is something that I'm mindful of. So I'm thinking, if I can't make any progress by pushing, I may as well back off a little bit and accept where I am. I'll stay close enough so that if this guy makes a mistake, I'm there to punish it and get ahead. But there's no point trying to sort of force the issue, because again, look at that, out of the chicane, got a better exit right on his bumper, and he just drives away. Now look how far away that he gets before we come up to Druid's Corner, the double right-hander here. In order to make a pass stick, I've got to get ahead of him by that amount of distance so that he can't attack me into the next corner. It's just unrealistic and it's unlikely to happen. All this time I'm lapping around 2 minutes and 12 seconds. I'd say that's about an average lap time. So I'm going 2, possibly 3 seconds a lap slower than what I know I'm capable of. And we're coming up to the end of lap 5 now. Let's have a look at the pit board. What's it say, Mark? Brilliant, it's grown again. Okay, back to plan D. Just sit on this guy's... Oh, hello, look at that. Did you see? He had a bit of a wobble going round Old Hall, and I've got him on the ropes here. Managed to get up alongside coming into Cascades. Completely was not expecting that. But I was in the right place at the right time. I managed to make the overtake. Make it stick, John. Make it stick. Look at him coming back at me. He's giving me a cheeky wave on his way past. But no, I'm not having it. I'm hanging it out around the outside of Lakeside. Probably about 80 miles an hour. 75, 80 or something like that. And oh God, look who's in the rearview mirror. It's the Warburtons with their incredibly quick Golf. Now, you just see in the mirror, we've shaken the Mazda, but here comes the leader flying past, normally on 3 wheels. It's a novel to see him on 4, actually, just there. But yeah, we've cleared the Mazda. Brilliant. Now, let's get a good exit from this chicane, because that Mazda could still overtake me as we come over Hilltop and then down into the Nicker chicane. Look at him in the rearview mirror. He should be closing, 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 closing. He is, but he's too far behind. I've managed to shake him. Brilliant. This is now my chance. I've got no car in front of me. I didn't know this at the time, but Luke Johnson has now pitted. So when I come over the start line, I'm not going to get a gap to Luke because I'll actually be leading the race. So now it's really mission on time. I have to make hay here. In the second half of the race, after the pit stops, the ebb and flow between myself and Luke will be what it will be, but this is a part of the race now where I've got a bit of say over what happens and I can put a bit of influence on my own result. So shaking a few corners, it's time to get the hammer down. Now this particular lap was, just looking at my lap chart, this was a 2 minutes 11.9. So like I said, the majority of the laps chasing the Mazda, I was doing about between 2:12 and 2:13. So I've managed to go about half a second quicker there, but I've now got cars coming out of the pits ahead of me, which is a bit annoying, but luckily they're faster cars, so they shouldn't hold me up and they shouldn't affect my lap times at all. You can see from the kitchen timer in the middle there, we were on 14 minutes, so the pit window is obviously open and has been for 4 minutes. Now, I was surprised that Luke pitted so early. Generally speaking, my theory is to stay out as late as you can, because if there is a safety car, or in this situation a code 60, which I can explain in a moment, that means that you lose much less track position to your rivals as they're driving around slowly rather than at full speed. Now, a code 60, for those of you that haven't heard of that before, it's a little bit like the virtual safety car in Formula 1. Full safety car, the safety car goes out on the circuit and everybody forms up behind it in a crocodile. The idea being that... Who's this in the mirror? Oh, that Fiesta was amazingly fast. Sorry, distracted myself. The safety car, everyone forms up behind it, it forms like a crocodile. The idea is that there is then a gap between the last car in that crocodile, big gap, to when the leader comes round again, or the safety car. That gap gives the marshals plenty of time to clear up an accident, push a car out of the gravel, clear up some debris, so on and so forth. Oh, there's a yellow flag there. What was that for? See the waved yellow on the left? I can't honestly remember what happened there. Sorry. Oh, there's a stationary car. Just saw it in the rearview mirror. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's the safety car. The code 60 is where the marshals don't really need a gap to work with, but there are marshals on what we call trackside. So we need everybody to slow down. So the Code 60 boards go out around the circuit, and when you see them, you slow down to 60 kilometres per hour, and when they go away, you go back up to racing speed. So it's very much like the Formula 1 virtual safety car. So that's why I always try and pit as late as possible, because if there is a safety car or a Code 60, then I get an advantage over the people that have already pitted. I was surprised Luke pitted so early. Maybe he wanted to check something on his car. Maybe he was stuck in traffic the same way that I was, although I find that hard to believe considering his lap times and the fact that he was pulling away from me by a chunk every time we went round. But anyway, he had his strategy, I had mine, and at this part of the race I've got a real opportunity to push on. Where are we now? We've just come out of the shell hairpin and there's nobody in front of me, so let me talk you through it. I stay in third gear up to this chicane. This chicane has had so many names over the years, I never know what to call it, so it's just become known as Mickey's to me because it's a bit Mickey Mouse. It's designed to give you a slower slower speed coming onto this really fast part of the circuit, because if we were all arriving here 20-30 miles an hour faster, it'd be a lot more dangerous. Similarly, this chicane here, the Nicker chicane, that was also put in as a safety measure several years ago, because Knickerbrook was a really fast right-hander and there was some horrible nasty accidents there, so that was just to slow everyone down. We're now moving into the woodland part of the circuit. Everything closes in on you around here, because you see the Armco on the left up close, the trees hanging over the circuit. You know, because everything's quite narrow, you really do get a sensation of speed down here, also going under the bridge. And whilst it's a straight, it's a very bob and weave, up and down sort of straight. You know, it's not flat as a pancake like a lot of circuits. And of course the compression here at Deer Leap, coming up onto the start line, does kind of grab your stomach, even though we're not going particularly quickly compared to some of the other race cars that go around this track. We feel it in the Puma doing about 85-90 miles an hour, so I'm sure the faster cars really do feel it there as well. Now, just completed another lap. What was my lap time on that one? Let me check my lap chart. I can't find it, I'll check it next time, but it was around the 2:11 mark, so I've pulled a second on what I was doing when I was stuck behind the Mazda. Now, although I wanted to be doing 2:10s in clear air, it has to be pointed out, it's something of a psychological one, this. I've always been one of the drivers that builds up to a lap time rather than just delivers it straight away. I'm not really sure why. It's partly a psychological, well, it is definitely a psychological thing, I'm sure, but having gone from doing 2:12s to do a 2:10 would have been a bit of a jump. Now, whilst I'm capable of it, and I know the car is capable of it, something in my head doesn't quite click that way. So I went from doing 2:12s, did a 2:11 then, and it just sort of happens incrementally for me. It always has. If any sports psychologist can help me with that, that would be great, because at the start of the races I can sometimes take 4 or 5 laps before I'm absolutely on my pace. Now, in this race I did get on pace very quickly, so I know that I can do it. It's just sometimes I get stuck in this, just improve a little bit, improve a little bit more, improve a little bit again, rather than doing it in one big chunk. Okay, something I forgot to mention earlier, you'll notice on the rear view camera that we've now got this big black half circle in the way. Unfortunately, the GoPro mount is not strong enough to withstand the curbing on the exit of the Nicker chicane. I went over it a little bit violently and the camera shook and pointed a little bit skyward. Luckily you can still see the track behind me and what's going on. So you can just see a little car in the horizon. That camera angle does get worse through the race, I'm afraid, because again I kept attacking the curbs a little bit too much. So we will see about trying to get that fixed, ready for the next round, don't worry. You'll notice that I crossed the line just then. I find this a bit hard to believe, but I was actually 4th overall. In the entire race, I was 4th car over that line. The fact that the majority of the field had already made their pit stops is irrelevant. I was on the verge of a podium position then. So I'll take that on merit. Back of the grid to 4th place is pretty impressive by anyone's standards, even if it does flatter to deceive a little bit. Now, who's that in the mirror? Is that the RX-7 again? RX-80? I can never remember which it is. RX-8? Yeah. It is. It's the one that I overtook into Cascades. He seems to have hooked it up a little bit. Maybe he's using me as a benchmark, because I know it's cliche and a lot of people say it, but it's true. Following a car is much easier. Look at, there goes the Golf again. That thing was incredible. Yeah, maybe the Mazda just hooked onto my bumper and found a better way of doing things, or focused his mind a little bit, who knows. But yeah, he's back there, and I really don't want him to be, because I'm going to start driving on my mirrors. Now, you might hear people say that phrase, driving in their mirrors. What it means is that you're concentrating on what's behind you rather than focusing on where to go in front of you. Now, in the real world, that translates itself as driving a slightly different line. You might drift over to the inside a little bit on entry as a sort of preemptive defensive manoeuvre. Now, what that does is it compromises you. And look, he's having a go at my inside here, but I know I'm better on the brakes. But I did drift over a little bit to the inside to try and defend, which compromised my exit. Now, I made a late decision there, get in the pits. The Mazda are also pitted behind me, but that won't matter, and I'll explain why in a moment. I made a very late decision there to pit on the grounds that I did not want to be driving in my mirrors for another lap with the Mazda behind me. So I dived over to the right hand side, slowed down to the pit limit, and came in for the stop. Now, I don't know what the dialogue was like here, but I'll shut up for a minute and you might be able to hear what Mark and I were chatting about.
I'll be waiting for everyone to go around before he can tell you what the time is. He's doing about a second lap quicker than you a minute.
That's right. That Mazda is... Even when I got past him, I'm still driving on my mirrors because he's there.
Right, got you.
I just wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
What's Luke doing there? 210s?
Yes.
Right.
2.9, 2.10s.
And he's about 20 odd seconds up the road.
Yeah, 20 or 30 seconds, yeah.
Jesus, okay.
Currently, he's doing... yeah, fastest 209 is doing 2.10s currently. Yours is 209, 8 time fastest.
Right, cheers mate, do. Cheers mate.
Okay, did you catch all that? I had 90 seconds from crossing the pit lane entry to crossing the pit lane exit, which gave me about 70 seconds of chit chat with Mark. In summary, he's just told me that Luke's about 20 seconds up the road and he's lapping around 2.9 and 2.10. Now, I can also lap around 2.9 and 2.10, but I need a clear track to do it. So hopefully I will get a clear track. Luke might hit some traffic, and all that advantage he pulled on me in the first half of the race, I might be able to pull it back in the second half of the race. That is all I can hope for. I've just got to hammer the lap times, do as well as I can, and hope that it's going to be enough. Whether it actually will be or not, of course, is to coin a cliche, in the lap of the gods. Now, I've already done a bit of a lap of Oulton Park with you. We've discussed about the safety car and the Code 60 situation, mentioned about the pit stop a little bit. So, rather than just drive around, well, what should we talk about now? What else is there? Well, there's the Puma Cup in general, actually. Lots of people ask about the Puma Cup, how to get started, or for bits of advice, or actually, before I get into that, who's that coming up behind me? That's a Renault Clio. There it goes, getting me into the inside of Nicker. Yeah, lots of people ask about the Puma Cup, and it's always my pleasure to talk to them and explain about it. Now, it's an entry-level series. It's for amateur drivers, amateur engineers, who have got a budget. It's a gateway class into motorsport. It's one... Oh, I buzzed the engine there. I don't remember doing that. Buy yourself a Puma. There goes the Golf again. strip out as much as you can for weight saving purposes, and then contact EMC Motorsport in Birmingham. They will sell you the kit that you need to turn your Puma into a racing Puma. The kit consists of the roll cage, the suspension, which is gas gold coilovers that have been custom designed for the Puma, rear suspension bushers, the sort of purple ones, Powerflex I think they are. You don't get the exhaust in the kit, you have to buy that separately, that's about £300. We have to run Dunlop Durezza tyres, which we are supplied, well the whole series is supplied by Mr Tyre Motorsport. They cost about £500 a set, and you can probably get a season out of a full set. If you do plenty of track days or testing, or just drive in an unnaturally hard way, in inverted commas, then you might eat up your tyres a little bit sooner. You're going to need your safety kit, so your seat, your harness, your fire extinguisher, as well as boots, gloves, overalls, helmet and hands. All in all, if you've got £5 in your pocket, you can go Puma Cup racing. That will get you everything you need to get started. Once you have got started, then the costs are reduced dramatically season on season, because you don't have all of the initial capital expense. Who's this coming up? Another Renault Clear. My God, these things are popular today, aren't they? So yeah, about £5,000 will get you everything you need to start Puma Cup racing. If you've never raced before, I'd strongly suggest a couple of track days just to get used to the car, get used to the circuit. This is once you've got your ARDS licence, of course, which again is a fairly straightforward process. Costs about £350 in total, but I did sort of include that in the £5 I mentioned a few minutes ago. So yeah, £5 and you're at the races. Get yourself a couple of track days under your belt, and then I tell you what, it does not matter how fast or slow you are at your first race. My first race in 2019 was at the Silverstone International Circuit, and I was 4 seconds slower than the next car, and it was a further 4 seconds to the leader. So I was technically 8 seconds off the pace. Now, in motorsport, that is a huge amount, but don't be disheartened by it, because the learning curve is so steep. And my theory, and my philosophy, if you like, was every time I go out in the Puma, just be a little bit closer, do a little bit better than I did last time. And sure enough, the next round I was about 2 seconds off the next car, and then I was on pace with the next car, and then you start mixing it in the pack, you know, and slowly but surely you can get there. And I don't want anyone to think that we are superheroes. It's absolute nonsense. Anybody can drive this Puma as fast as I'm driving it, if they've put in the hours that I've put in. I'm no brilliant racing driver or anything like that. It's just learning how to do it. In the same way that if you're learning a musical instrument, the more you practice, the better you get. It's as simple as that. The only people who can claim some unearthly talent are the people that do this professionally. Everybody out here today at the CSCC, in the Puma Cup, whichever series they're running with the club, they're all amateur racing drivers. Some of them have been doing it 20-30 years, some of them even more, and guess what? They are bloody good at it. They can do things with the car that I can't do yet. And that's the important thing. It's things that I can't do with the car yet. You have to listen to people who are more experienced than you. Listen to people who are faster than you. Sometimes they will suggest something which is completely contrary to how you feel that you should be driving the car to get the most out of it. And you will try their suggestion, and it will actually set you back a little bit. You'll be slower because you're uncomfortable with it and it feels unnatural. But once you get over that and you practice and practice and practice, eventually the lap times will come back to where they used to be, and they will push on, and you'll find a chunk of pace. Now, over the 4 years that I've been doing this, that's happened periodically, and now pretty much every Puma Cup race I go to, I'm fighting for a podium. Now, crossing the line this time, I've forgotten what lap we're on, but I can see the timer there. I've just done a 2:09.3. that was probably my fastest lap of the race, because I'm chasing Luke down. The gap on the pit board was about 18 seconds, something like that, and it did ebb and flow a little bit, but it had come down from about 22 when I left the pits. So whilst I am catching Luke, I'm not confident that I'm actually going to catch him by the end of the race. There simply just aren't enough laps left. So assuming everything goes without incident, I'm now rolling around for second place. But in my head, that wasn't enough. Motorsport is an expensive hobby. I've touched on the amount it costs to get started in the Puma Cup. I might do a video actually going through that in a bit more detail at some point, but for the time being, that's how much it will cost to get started. The actual round by round costs, every race is about £420 to enter, so it's not cheap, but when you consider what you get for it and the thrill of racing and driving around a racetrack, so on and so forth, you want to make the most of it because it is such a phenomenal hobby. Now, as I'm driving around here, I'm happy and content that I've gone from qualifying on pole position, starting at the back, to having a sort of scratch win over Luke, even though I'm second on circuit. I still want to drive around as fast as I can, and I'm chasing that lap delta, because I'm now thinking, if I can't get the win, I want the fastest lap. And if I get the fastest lap, I want it to be a lap record. I want this Puma to have gone round this circuit faster than any other Puma in this specification for the Puma Cup class than anyone's ever done before, and that will mean that I've got the most out of this weekend that I possibly could, and I'll have had the biggest bang for my buck as far as this entry fee is concerned. Now, I mentioned about the entry fee. It's about £420, £440 each round, depending on the circuit. We normally get a 30-minute practice session, practice/qualifying, followed by a 40-minute race. Now, for diesel to and from the circuit, fuel for the Puma, the Puma will go through about 3/4 of a tank in a 40-minute race, so I normally fill up with half a tank for qualifying and 3/4 for the race. Throw in some meals here and there, some drinks here and there, so on and so forth, and I budget around £600 per event. Now, because the Puma Cup is not a championship, each round is a standalone event. There's no adding up of points for a big trophy at the end of the year. If your bank balance means that £600 is going to be a bit of a stretch that month, don't do it. There's no point busting your bank to go motor racing. You'll just cause yourself so much stress and anguish. It's not worth it. Just skip around, wait till the next one. I've already skipped 3 rounds this year. One because I was on holiday, one because I didn't want to go to the circuit in question, which I won't mention which circuit it was, and another one because my bank balance was, yeah, this is a bit close right now, state of the country, the way things are going, don't risk it. Don't put yourself in the hole for it, it's not worth it. But I hope that's a bit of a help to anyone that's considering joining the Puma Cup. Feel free to message me, drop a line in the comments, or find us on Facebook and Instagram. We're just at Team Guroba, which is Guroba. Ask me any questions. You will get a very honest answer from me. I want to encourage people to join the Puma Cup. I want the series to grow. I'm also open to car shares. If anybody out there has got their racing license and is starting in their motorsport career, doesn't want to commit to paying for a car, whatever the situation, if you want to do a car share with me, I will happily discuss that with you. Just get in touch. That could be in the Puma Cup, it could be 750 Motor Club Road Sports, or the BRSCC's Club Sport Series. We're competitive in all 3 of those categories, and we visit pretty much every circuit in the country at some point. So if you are interested, drop me a line. I'll be happy to talk to you about that. Whether you want to just do a track day and see what the car's like, if you want to do a race where you share the car with me, that's fine. If you want to do a full race with the Puma all on your own like I've done on this one, again, absolutely fine. Drop me a line and we can have a chat about things. So back to this race. We're actually on the last lap now. Sorry, I should have sort of kept you up to date with that. The gap to Luke came down to about 16 seconds, and I may as well tell you now rather than wait until the end. Luke must have had a bit of a mare on the final lap because he dropped 4 seconds, and the gap at the line when the checkered flag was thrown was 12.5. So I was really chuffed that I managed to bring it into there. But I just want to draw your attention to the rearview mirror. Hey, did you see that? That was our good friend, the one and only Gary Barlow. The Gary Barlow, for anyone who is wondering. Gary drives a Honda Integra, which is run with DHD. Gary's part of DHD Motorsport, who are our paddock buddies and have been for 20 odd years. He's always joking with me about how many times he's going to lap me in a race, and that time he came up behind me, got scared, got sideways, went all over the grass, but he only took 2 corners to put it right, and there he goes flying around me on the inside of Lodge Corner. I must have, I was a bit annoyed at that because at the time I didn't realise, but here's the checkered flag. This is actually the end of the race. I think, is it this one? I can't actually see. 2:11.1 on the timer. Am I still pushing? Yes, I am. So no, that wasn't the last lap of the race. My apologies. So if I'd have managed to hang on one more lap, then Gary wouldn't have lapped me, and I would have had bragging rights in the paddock. It's always a bit of a goal, that, to avoid getting lapped by as many of the leaders as possible, especially when one of them's your mate, like Gary is. Now, so yeah, this is actually the last lap. I was talking about how close I got to Luke. By the end of the race, the gap was 12.5 seconds. Now, considering it was 14 seconds at the end of lap 1, it was 12 seconds at the end of the race. So imagine if Luke and I had started alongside each other, we would have been nose to tail for the best part of 40 minutes. Now, I go back to my decision to start from the back of the grid. There is a part of me that regrets it because I could have had an amazingly brilliant race with Luke, but then there's a bit of me that says it was absolutely the right thing to do. There's also the competitive element as well as the safety. Now, I chose to go to the back for predominantly safety reasons, I have to be honest, but also, if I was Luke or any of the other Puma Cup drivers and we took our positions on the grid per our lap times, but the guy who was realistically 2 places ahead of us on the grid was actually starting 6 rows further up the grid, I would be a bit hacked off with that, because having all those cars between you could mean an unsurmountable advantage by the end of lap 1, and that would have been grossly unfair. Now, I won't lie, the decision was a safety one, but there was a small portion which just said it's not fair on the other Puma Cuppers, and I was brought up to believe in treat as you wish to be treated, and if the boot was on the other foot, I wouldn't have wanted any of my competitors getting that unfair advantage from what was an innocent mistake by the timekeepers. So there we go, I've just crossed the line. That is the end of the race. It's been great. I didn't know it at the time, but we did set the fastest lap. It was a Puma Cup lap record, and we went from all the way at the back of the grid to 2nd place, and a net win over Luke in terms of the sort of scratch times. Not that counts for anything. My trophy says 2nd place, Luke says 1st place, and that's the result. So congratulations to Luke. I've not seen his in-car, but I spoke to him afterwards and he said he had a pretty clear run of things, and fair play to him. Here's the actual results from the race. Luke, myself, Mr. Cotgrove and Mr. Simpson, I think it's only their 2nd or 3rd race, so for them to have bagged the podium is brilliant. Mark in 4th, and then the 2 Jacksons, father and son, Neil and Frank, in 5th place. Getting a bit behind here, Oulton Park is the next one in 2 weeks' time. That race we are hoping to broadcast live on the YouTube channel from the in-car camera. We'll do a better job than we did this time, and we promise that you'll have audio. If you can make it to the track, that would be awesome. It would be great to see you. So in the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, drop me a line in the messages. Love you all. Thank you very much, and see you again. Bye.